you a little brief about CME and what we do. We're a technology consulting firm. We started in Lebanon, so it means a lot for us to be within the entrepreneurial and innovation centers like Berytech. We started in 2003 as a Lebanese startup, and we started to work with US customers. We developed our team from software to hardware to IT consulting, even manufacturing now. So we have 4 different offices. Lebanon is the central of all the managerial and engineering workforce, in addition to the US, Argentina, India, and China, where we do, of course, the manufacturing of all our devices. We're around 300 engineers, half of them are Lebanese. So I just wanted to mention this because for me, it means we have the capabilities to do whatever it takes to be or to compete at an international level. Now, these are some of the things, the smart things that we call, that we developed in Lebanon, okay? And it makes decisions on behalf of human. The first one is an infrared thermometer. It's used for food safety. The set that you see on the bottom of the screen, it's about energy management, and this is where I'm going to start my talk today. So this is a box, okay? It's a simple box. It's powered with an AI engine, artificial intelligence. It's a brain that you install in a restaurant with the purpose of controlling all the equipment that you have in a restaurant to make sure that we maintain the energy consumption at a very specific level. We don't cross it. This is for the purpose of reducing energy consumption and the cost of energy. It's being deployed now in the US in a couple of stores. Now, what's the challenge in doing this? The challenge is about maintaining the store operation or the restaurant operation without interruption while we're controlling everything around you, from the microwave, the oven, the heater, the air conditioning, and even interacting with the point of sale and the occupancy of the restaurant. So we know whether you have customers in place or how many orders you have to prepare ahead. All of that is captured and centralized in this box, analyzed, and then based on that, it takes real-time decisions. So we had some challenges to adopt or to start testing this scenario, because it's not easy at all to test it in a very friendly environment like the office here, or in a fake environment where you're just faking stuff. You have to test it with real data. AI is about testing with real data. You cannot build algorithms and just test them with simulated and already prepared data. You have to test it with real information from the interactions that you're seeing. So imagine if we prepared this circuit and we sent it to deploy it on site in a restaurant. Do you think they would accept to put a similar thing in the restaurant? And I'm mentioning this because usually that's what we see when we deal with startups. They show us these things and they want us to try these things. It doesn't work. At the same time, we're not expected to have a product similar to Nest, okay, a neat and perfect product, so we can test it. There is always a balance between these things. The balance that we did is simply boxes, very clean boxes that require minimal wiring, okay, very simple. It requires an electrician, of course, but any electrician can install it, okay? So we already defined ahead of time, before even approaching the restaurants, the requirements to install our devices or our equipment in the restaurants, which is available and simple to install for any electrician. It doesn't require a ramp-up time and a PhD to know how to install the device. So this is what we did. We sent them the devices. They hired the restaurants that accepted to be our first adopters. They accepted to hire any electrician and they installed it. However, we sent someone from our team, of course, to be next to them and to make sure that everything goes according to our plan. So the first 2 characteristics that you always need to have in mind when you develop a product and you want to adopt it quickly: triability. For sure you need to try it, and not in a friendly environment or with your friends and your colleagues. It needs to be tried by its end users, okay? And second, it's simplicity. It doesn't require special knowledge to use your products. It needs to be simple for anyone with a proper expertise, with a predefined expertise to use your product. Next, the products needs to know the environment where you're installing. You cannot just build a generic product that doesn't even, especially for early adoption, that's not aware of the environment parameters. For instance, imagine if we develop, actually the solution that we developed, it's not just the box, it's the box, power outlets, okay, so the priz الكهرباء, switches, power strips, everything that you think of in a restaurant and that deals with electricity. We replace them all, okay? So imagine if we developed an outlet that doesn't take into consideration the nature of the equipment that you have in a restaurant. A microwave, an industrial microwave, is not similar to what you have in your residential homes. A freezer is not similar to the fridge that you have at home. So they all have different types of loads and different types of electrical specifications, and it needs to be taken into consideration when you design your products. And this is not something that you can develop later on to adapt your product. This is part of your first product, the first MVP. You cannot compromise on this. So the second or the third characteristic is compatibility. So these are the main three parameters that you always need to take into consideration whenever you're dealing or you're trying to adopt your product for the first adopters. So triability, simplicity, and compatibility. Now, what happens, imagine if we send our products and let's say the controller that controls the freezer turns off the freezer on a weekend. What happens? They will probably throw the food on Monday morning. Do you think they would accept to keep our product 1 minute? Beyond that, they will not. So the concept of fail fast, this is what you always hear during any session for startups or entrepreneurship. It's a new, it's not new concept, but this is the trend now. It's okay to fail fast. That's fine for software, because I know this, we're coming from a software background, but it's not fine for hardware. Why? Because hardware is about interaction with human. It's about interaction with people. You can easily compromise safety or anything that deals with the hardware that you're providing. That's why it's very important to keep in mind the safety concerns as part of your MVP or your first product before anything else. Second, you also need to keep in mind the value of your products to make sure that you're delivering the value and not just you can compromise on that. Other examples, this is Tesla. In 2008 or 9, I think, they had a defect in Model S that put the car on fire, okay, and they lost 67% of their fleet, of their production power. So imagine that. It's the smartest, probably the most efficient electrical cars that we know today. Uber Technologies, they suspended their program, the autonomous car driving program. Why? Because they had a crash in Arizona. And actually, last Sunday, Elaine, I'm not sure if you heard about the story, but she died because of a crash with an autonomous car. So these things, you cannot just put them on with the customers or your early customers and just forget them. You always have to be careful about safety concerns, and your value proposition. You should never compromise on this. And that brings us to another matter, which is certifications. Sometimes when you deal with robotics or anything related to hardware and Internet of Things, you think that it's okay to think about certifications later on when you have a ready product. Certifications are there to protect you. When you're talking about FCC, UL, or safety certifications that are required in the US market or even in the markets that you're not thinking of today, they are there to protect you, against insurance companies, against lawsuits, against anything that can happen, because that's the norm, that's the standard. So even for your MVP, it needs to, maybe it's not certified, but it needs to be compliant with the major safety certifications out there. Now, one more thing. Remember what I said when we started to deploy our solution. We sent our team to be next to the electricians, right? It's not because we know more than them, but because we want to learn. We want to see them how they are installing our devices, our equipment. And this is really valuable because that's the first line of defense that you have. Even if you are the owner of the idea or the CEO of your company, you have to be the support mentor or even support officer of your team once you deploy a new product. That's how much you need to be close to your products once you launch them on the market. Now, some of the challenges that you will face in certifications and manufacturing. First, as I mentioned, market dependency, but you should not limit yourself to the market where you're developing. You always need to take into consideration the stuff or the problems that you're gonna face in the future, regardless of the market. Second point, and this is something that we're really lacking in Lebanon, certifications know-how. Because we don't have certification rules in Lebanon, and this is something that they don't teach us at schools, so you have to develop this knowledge. Unfortunately, we don't have it in Lebanon. That's why the best way is to learn it from someone else, is to seek help from other consultants outside Lebanon, or even someone who dealt with this in Lebanon. Why? Because you're gonna pay the price really high if you don't do this. We didn't do this, okay? We learned it by ourselves. We lost money, we lost time. And this is something that you really can avoid by simply getting in touch with consultants outside Lebanon or in Lebanon if you find them, to find solutions for this. And never think that you cannot find them. You can always find them. Third point, and it's about the manufacturing. Once you reach the manufacturing, it's the low volume production problem. As a startup, or once you have a product, but you're not ready to scale because you don't have an order of 1 million items, right? You're not gonna find it easy to build your supply chain or your value chain with a quantity of 1,000 units. You're not going to get the best prices. You're not going to deal with the best suppliers. So this is a big challenge. And you're going to deal with a lot of delays also due to that, because they don't give you the priorities. Once you deal with a Chinese factory who's producing 1 million item for a company in the US, he's not going to give you a priority just because you're a startup or you're producing 1,000 units. So the best way to do it is to really control your value chain and to identify the suppliers that you're going to work with since day one. And don't just say, okay, we will have to deal with a manufacturing contractor later on, we'll identify it, or think it's an easy thing that you can solve. I don't have an answer, okay, because it's not a generic answer, but this is something that you need to pay attention for since day one of your idea. And that's also going to cause inaccurate pricing, because if you don't own your value chain and your supply chain, you will never have control of your pricing, which is fine, but at least you need to build a range, minimum, maximum price. That's what the investors are going to ask you, how much it's going to cost you, how much you're going to sell. And it's very inaccurate to say it's going to cost me $100. It's always going to cost you a little bit more or a little bit less. And sometimes it's not a little bit. Sometimes the difference is really big. There are things that you will not think of. The certification cost, you have to average it on all the quantities that you're going to sell. The molding, okay, once you have to produce large quantities, then you have to build molds, and you have to build for the plastic and all the things that you require. This is also a one-time cost that is probably in hundreds of thousands of dollars. It depends on the machine or the items that you're producing. So to summarize, I think before you even think about scaling your products or your ideas, specifically hardware products, first, never compromise on certification. And never think that, okay, we'll think later on about certification. Certification should be a priority because it's going to be your insurance to whatever happens in the future. Second, to understand your value chain, to understand the elements of your supply chain. Who's going to be your suppliers? Do you have options in your suppliers? You cannot just rely on one supplier. You have to choose multiple ones. Even the factory, you should always have different factories and not just a single one. Otherwise, you definitely have a single point of failure in your value chain, for sure. And third, your cost, which is that I talked about right now. It's about controlling and identifying the margins of your cost. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk today, it's always about the value propositions that you're offering. It's not just about uh, putting things on the market or trying new things. So robotics, it's about smart things that make decisions on behalf of human. So you always have to take that into consideration. And I go back to the safety concerns. This is not something that you can easily compromise on at all. And Murphy's law. So if you think that something is not going to happen, it is going to happen for sure. That's the mode that you need to think of when you deal with robotics. Thank you.